Senate will come to order. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume legislative session and resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S 4445, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar 413 S 4445, a bill to protect and expand nationwide access to fertility treatment, including in vitro fertilization.
Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I am proud today to be joining my colleague from Texas in support of the IVF Protection Act. I am grateful to Senator Cruz for his leadership on this important topic. Both Senator Cruz and I are parents. We can both attest to the fact that there is no greater blessing in life than our children. For many Americans, building a family, becoming a mom or a dad, that's their American dream. IVF makes the difference in achieving that dream for millions of Americans who are facing infertility. IVF helps aspiring parents to start families, to grow their family. In the U.S., nearly 200 babies are born a day. So nearly 2% of all babies born are because of IVF. This treatment is really a game changer for so many families. That's why I strongly support continued nationwide access to IVF. IVF is legal and available from coast to coast in every single corner of America and in all 50 states. That includes my home state of Alabama, where Governor Ivey and the Alabama legislature acted quickly to protect IVF access. Today, we have an opportunity to act quickly and overwhelmingly to protect continued nationwide IVF access for loving American families. Our IVF Protection Act would do just that. It would give aspiring parents nationwide the certainty and peace of mind that IVF will remain legal and available in every state. Our bill is the only bill that protects IVF access while safeguarding religious liberty. It also could get 60 votes in the United States Senate, and isn't that the point? Yet we're going to have a show vote when we've been talking and saying that we want to protect access to IVF, but yet no one is working to actually get to the 60-vote threshold, which makes me wonder how serious my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are about this. In an era of hyper-partisanship, this bill, the IVF Protection Act, should be the one that's on the floor today. This is the bill that will give aspiring parents confidence and continued hope that their dreams of bringing life into this world can come true. Look, as I talk to families across Alabama and parents who are hopeful they can bring a child into this world, making sure that this process is protected and available is critically important. However, this bill isn't the one that Democrats are putting on the floor. This is not drafted in that way. It's drafted to be a partisan scare tactic and what we're going to see today. For example, it's not written in a way to narrowly cover IVF. It includes completely separate treatments and technology, even including human cloning. Democrats are choosing to spread misinformation rather than fostering hope. The American people deserve better. The path forward is Senator Cruz and my IVF Protection Act. Again, I want to applaud my colleague from Texas for his unwavering and continued support for nationwide IVF access. While Democrats prioritize scaring families, Republicans will continue to fight for them. I yield the floor.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I want to thank my friend Senator Britt for her powerful and passionate defense of in vitro fertilization. Senator Britt has been an incredible partner as she and I have worked to pass landmark federal legislation protecting IVF for every American. I'm proud to rise once again to speak on an issue that is personal and vital to millions of American families, the protection of in vitro fertilization. IVF is a medical miracle that has brought the joy of parenthood to millions of families who otherwise might never have experienced it. I am an unequivocal supporter of protecting IVF, and I'm grateful that IVF has given so many parents struggling with infertility the gift of finally holding a child, a baby in their arms, finally having the opportunity to be a mother or a father and to raise a son or daughter and to give all of the love in a family that they so desperately want to give. Today, unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are staging an empty show vote on what they call an IVF bill in order to stoke baseless fears about IVF and push their broader political agenda. Let's be clear. There is not a single senator in this chamber on either side of the aisle who wants to ban IVF. All 100 senators, to the best of my knowledge, support IVF. Not a single one has called for banning it. And yet, I previously voted against the Democrats' partisan legislation because it's not an IVF bill. It's designed to backdoor and federalize broad abortion legislation, which I understand is the Democrats' partisan position, but it is contrary to the views of a great many Americans. And the partisan Democrat bill also deliberately overturns the conscious protections of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. You know, it is unfortunate that Democrats have abandoned what used to be a bipartisan commitment to religious liberty, and they are now more than willing to overturn religious liberty protections. Instead of pushing a partisan and frankly cynical agenda, I invite my Democrat colleagues to actually do what they claim they want to do, which is work with me today and stand together to pass clear federal legislation protecting IVF. IVF is profoundly pro-family. Over 8 million babies have been born through IVF, providing millions of American families the chance to embrace the joy of raising a child. It's an avenue of hope for those struggling with infertility. Misconceptions and deliberate scare tactics from the Democrats about the legal standing of IVF only serve to hurt families who are desperately trying to welcome a child into their lives. What the American people deserve is straightforward pro-IVF legislation. That's why my colleague, Senator Britt, and I have introduced the IVF Protection Act, legislation that offers ironclad federal statutory protection for IVF. Our bill does not engage in backdoor politics. It does not infringe on the deeply held beliefs of individuals or organizations. It simply does what needs to be done, safeguarding the right of couples to grow their family if they choose to use IVF, because this should not be a political issue. Instead, it's a deeply human issue. Our bill unequivocally prohibits any state or local government from banning IVF, ensuring that no family will be caught in the crossfire of state-level judicial interpretations. It provides peace of mind to parents and to aspiring parents, while still allowing states to implement reasonable health and safety standards. It ensures that access to IVF is fully protected by federal law, so that every family praying to have a child will be fully protected in their right to pursue parenthood. This isn't just policy. It is a promise to honor and support your desire to welcome a new baby into your family. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bill, This is a moment for us to unite political divides and affirm our shared belief in the sanctity of family and the promise of life. In just a moment, I will propound a unanimous consent request to take up and pass the Cruz-Britt bill. Because if we truly stand with families, we must act now to ensure that IVF remains protected today and for generations to come. Now, for those of you in the gallery, those of you at home, there are times when Senate procedure can sound confusing. I want to explain what you're about to see. I am going to ask this body for unanimous consent to pass Senator Britt's and my legislation protecting IVF, putting it into federal law, a clear federal statutory protection for IVF. After I ask for consent, we are going to see a Democrat senator stand up and begin speaking. When she begins speaking, you should listen to two magic words. I object. If the Democrats say those words, I object, it will defeat this bill. And I want you to understand all that is necessary is for the Democrats not to say those words, I object. We could have Democrat senators stand up and give speeches about all of their policy priorities, but understand, the show vote this afternoon is not about IVF, because if the Democrats wanted to protect IVF, this bill would pass 100-0 right now. What the show vote this afternoon is about is Democrats want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars running TV ads in an election season, falsely claiming that Republicans oppose IVF. So listen carefully. If you hear the words, I object, from Senate Democrats, then you will understand the only reason that IVF is not protected with strong, ironclad protection in federal statute is because Senate Democrats cynically object to protecting IVF. And I would note to the members of the media who are writing on this, the Democrats are staging the show vote to get the headlines. They want you to write headlines, every Republican opposes IVF. Well, if you're going to write those false headlines, at least include the fact that today the Senate would have passed 100-0 strong, clear federal protection of IVF for every mom and dad, every parent in America, but for the fact that Senate Democrats cynically object while they claim to support IVF. Well, let's listen and see what happens. Let's hear if we hear the words, I object. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Finance Committee be discharged from further consideration of S. 4368, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I have been perfectly clear about the glaring issue with this Republican bill. The cold, hard reality is that this Republican bill does nothing to meaningfully protect IVF from the biggest threats from lawmakers and anti-abortion extremists all over this country. It would still allow states to regulate IVF out of existence. And this bill is silent on fetal personhood, which is the biggest threat to IVF. It is silent on whether states can demand that an embryo be treated the same as a living, breathing person, or whether parents should be allowed to have clinics dispose of unused embryos, something that is a common, necessary part of the IVF process. Talk to the experts who provide this care. Talk to the families who are seeking it. And that question looms large in their minds. What are we supposed to do if our state says these embryos are living, breathing people? Do we have to do this process in another state? What is our legal risk here? That uncertainty is at the core of the chaos Republican bans have caused. The last time Republicans offered this hollow gesture of a bill, I asked the junior senator from Texas point blank, do you support letting parents have unused embryos disposed of? And a funny thing actually happened. He said on the floor, I'll answer that question, but he never did. He spoke about what the laws in some of our states are, but he never actually said what he supported. He never said what he believes should be federal law. He never mentioned that he once pledged to support a constitutional amendment to establish fetal personhood as the law of the land. So I ask all of my Republican colleagues once again, as a matter of national policy, should parents be allowed to dispose of unused embryos? If so, why is that key provision missing from your bill? Well, we all know why. And if not, how can you look the American people in the eye and say you support IVF? It doesn't compute. Thank you, Mr. President. I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
So I would note there is one reason and one reason only that the Senate has not passed 100-0, a clear, unequivocal federal protection of IVF, because Senate Democrats cynically chose to object. Now, the senator from Washington raised all sorts of issues that are frankly red herrings. The issues she raised are current state law in multiple states, including Louisiana, including Missouri, including Georgia. And yet, IVF is fully protected and available in those states. Senator Britt and I very consciously focused this bill on issues that could command bipartisan agreement. There is not a word in this bill that any senator, Democrat or Republican, disagrees with. Understand why the Democrats are objecting. The Democrats are objecting because they do not want to protect IVF in federal statute. It is cynical because we are 49 days away from Election Day, and they intend to try to scare voters in elections across the country by misleading the voters. I'll point out, at the same time that we have a presidential election, many of us served with the Vice President Kamala Harris. I remember Vice President Harris voting again and again and again against border security, against a border wall, and yet right now Vice President Harris is spending millions of dollars running ads with pictures of Donald Trump's border wall. It is deeply cynical, and it is because she is running away from her open borders record. The same is true here. The Democrats are going to spend millions of dollars arguing that Republicans are opposed to IVF and ignoring the fact that it is Democrats standing up and objecting that prevent it from being protected in federal law. The Democrats don't want to protect IVF because if we pass this law, you know what? They couldn't run their misleading campaign commercials. From a partisan perspective on the Democrat side, far better to block strong federal legislation protecting IVF than to actually come together in a bipartisan way and pass this. I wish we had done that. But this is an election season, and perhaps that is asking too much for my colleagues.
Will the senator yield for a question?
I would happily yield to Senator Cornyn for a question.
Senator
I'm a
from
little
Texas.
confused. If the Democrats sincerely want to pass a law relative to IVF, wouldn't they ordinarily work to have an amendment process where we can actually have debate and maybe achieve some consensus? It seems to me that by introducing a bill that they know is bound to fail and blocking the bill that you and the senator from Alabama have offered, that they are guaranteeing there will be no federal protection for IVF. Am I missing something?
As usual, my friend, the fellow senator from Texas, you're not missing something. That is precisely what's going on. This is not lawmaking. This is politics. This is partisan politics. This is an election campaign commercial that the Democrats are engaged in. And to make clear, Leader Schumer knows the result of the vote this afternoon. Why? Because we had the same vote just a couple of months ago. He knows exactly the result. Why are we voting on it again? Because they want reporters to write the same headlines again to deceive the voters. Again, I invite my Democrat colleagues, this should be an easy bill to support if, and this is a big if, in good faith you actually want to protect IVF legislation. If you want a campaign issue, the worst thing for Democrats is actually to pass the Cruz-Britt bill, because then it takes the issue off the table, because every mom and dad and every woman or man who wants to be a mother or father knows IVF is protected. The Democrats don't want that.
Would the senator yield for one more question?
I'm happy to yield to Senator Cornyn.
So if Senator Schumer and Senator Murray, the Senate Democrats who've offered this bill, were actually serious about passing a bill to protect IVF, wouldn't the logical approach be to make sure that there was an opportunity to offer and vote on an amendment? And if they were to prevail in their version of the bill, well, 60 senators could determine that and make that happen. If in fact 60 senators agreed with the bill that you and the senator from Alabama have offered, then that bill would prevail and go to the House and then presumably to the president for his signature. But apparently they are afraid to allow the Cruz-Britt bill to even get a vote. They have so little confidence in the likely electoral outcome of their proposal that they don't even want a vote on the Cruz-Britt bill. So again, I just wanted to ask the senator a couple questions because I was wondering whether I was missing something. This seems like, as you said, a cynical show vote and certainly not one to accomplish a result. I appreciate your answering the questions.
So the senator from Texas is exactly correct. And as Senator Cornyn knows well, there are multiple ways to draft a bill. What the Democrats have drafted is a bill that is intended to force Republicans to vote no, because that's the objective. They want the no vote, so they deliberately have put poison pills in this bill. They call it an IVF bill, but it is a radical pro-abortion bill, and it is a radical anti-religious liberty bill. Their objective is they want their bill to fail because this is all about misleading campaign commercials. The bill that Senator Britt and I drafted, we worked very carefully to draft a bill that every senator could agree with. There's not a word in our bill that the Democrats disagree with. Look, abortion is an issue that divides this chamber. There are some of us who are pro-life. There are others who are pro-choice. Senator Britt and I recognize we were not going to resolve the disagreements on abortion on the floor today. So we deliberately drafted a bill that is focused on IVF specifically. There are no poison pills in our bill. There's nothing designed to force the Democrats to vote no. And Senator Cornyn is exactly right that if our bill were on the floor, I believe it would pass. I believe any Democrat voting honestly would vote for it. But I think at a minimum we would get 60 votes and enough to pass it, which is why the Democrats object to taking it up, because they want their bill to fail in order to be misleading.
Senator, yield for a question.
I am happy to yield to the senator from Alabama.
So it is my understanding, as the two of us came together, 49 Republicans strong, sent a letter, statement saying, we strongly support IVF. Now, if the Democrats were serious about needing to protect IVF, which, by the way, is legal and accessible in every state, then wouldn't they have come to us to figure out a pathway forward? But yet today, instead of taking our bill, and if they feel like it needs to be improved, working to do that, they're choosing to do a show vote just to give themselves something to campaign on. Has anyone approached you about working together to find a pathway forward for IVF? Because I am a strong supporter of IVF. I am proudly here, pro-family, believe that we need to find ways to make sure that people do have access and that continues that way. And I think we've been very clear, but no one has approached me. And you have to get to 60. So if you really believe that IVF is in trouble and in jeopardy, then wouldn't we be the first two people you would come talk to? And no one has talked to me, but yet this bill is going on the floor, which means they know they can't get to 60. There's only 51 of them. Maybe they have a few more. My question is, has anyone approached you? Because if they authentically wanted to protect IVF, if they really cared about women and parents who were wanting to bring a child into the world and they want to give them certainty, they just don't want something to campaign on, I think we'd be the first two people you would come talk to figure out how to have a path forward. No one has spoken to me. It's so disingenuous. This body is supposed to be more than that. Has anyone spoken to you?
I thank Senator Britt for that question. No, no Democrat has spoken to me. I am, like you, unequivocally in support of IVF. But understand, the Democrats do not want to pass legislation protecting IVF. If you're trying to pass legislation, you don't put poison pills in it. That's what the Democrats have done. Their objective, their goal, is to have their partisan bill fail so that they can use it for political campaigns across this country. It is designed to fail, and it's cynical. It's also predicated on, sadly, the failure of the media. I would note there are no reporters that I see sitting in the gallery. It's predicated on what they know the media will refuse to cover, that they are the ones blocking IVF. They're counting on the media to be partisan and to push their deceptive messaging. We should be protecting IVF. We should be standing unequivocally. As Senator Britt noted, all 49 Republicans stood and signed a joint letter saying, we support IVF. We support protecting IVF. I would note the last time Senator Britt and I came to this floor, we were joined by Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas. Senator Roger Marshall is a physician. He's an OBGYN who has performed IVF for years. He has helped hopeful parents become parents through IVF. And it is literally the cynical position of Democrats that an IVF doctor is opposed to IVF. I want to repeat that for you because it is such an absurd statement. It is the partisan political position of Senate Democrats that an IVF doctor, Roger Marshall, has helped hundreds of parents conceive through IVF, and yet Senate Democrats claim he somehow opposes IVF. That's not true. Use your common sense. This is cynical, and it is wrong. But for those of you at home about to be subjected to millions of dollars of false campaign ads from the Democrats, just understand, if they are telling you that there are senators who are trying to ban IVF, they are deliberately misleading you. And they're doing it because they don't want to defend their actual position on the issues. I yield the floor.